Hello, everyone. Welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week, as we are looking to be able to bring you all of the latest news regarding all things Rangers. We are obviously in the close season. However, some exciting news did come out of the club a couple of days ago, which is that Rangers have now launched a fan share offering. And we've taken the opportunity to speak to James Pollock, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Tifosi, who are the club partner. And James has been asked along to join me today. James, first of all, thank you for allowing this time in your diary. I know we're going to talk about the uptake since the offer went out publicly on Tuesday. I imagine you've been a busy man and very much in demand, but thank you so much for sparing the time to come along to talk to us.
Not at all. And yes, we've been quite busy. It's been really well received. And we've been answering a lot of queries that have come through on the live chat and the email and a couple of calls. And a lot of very interested parties out there, people looking to get involved, asking us great questions, some of which I think we'll try and touch on today so that the others who are wondering the same things can get an answer to those questions. But yeah, it's been off to a really good start.
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't heard, there is information for this on the club website. So obviously, please go in to check that out. So if you haven't had the opportunity, it's a great article and some video on there as well regarding the plan behind the share offering and what it's looking for. Chairman Douglas Park has said that Rangers are here for 150 years and it's vital that we future-proof the next 150 years. The club has to put the best possible position, and by widening the ownership to a broader base of like-minded supporters and shareholders, we feel it helps put the club on an even stronger footing going forward. James, I think it's been really interesting to be able to see that this is now, for me, and I echo John Bennett's comments that he's made across kind of various different platforms around the idea that we will future-proof it. We have to build on success. We have to strengthen when in a place of strength. I think it's a really interesting time to be able to try and do that. As you said, we'll go through some questions and we'll have a kind of bit of a chat around it. The great news for anyone listening to this is absolutely not my area of expertise. So if James can make it make sense to me, then anyone will be able to understand it. However, one of the things I kind of just wanted to touch on there was tell us a little about Tifosi and the kind of club partnership that you've entered into. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and the company background?
Yeah, of course. So Tifosi was founded around 5-6 years ago, and we've evolved a great deal since we first started. Actually, we started off doing straight crowdfunding, which was non-regulated offerings, so not investments but donations in return for gifts, signed jerseys and the like. And we then got our license to operate with real investments from the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the regulator here in the UK. And since then, we've been offering through our platform securities in various clubs, and those are both on the equity side, the shares, like we're doing with Rangers, but also on the debt side. So we've issued bonds so that supporters have been able to invest in a debt product, get a return on that investment, and then get their money back at the end. And obviously, it depends on the specific club situation and the objectives of the club. What are the financial strategies that they want to employ? Which kind of offering makes most sense for each club? And in the case of Rangers, I think the feeling is that at this point in its history, obviously with the recent progress made both on and off the pitch, now is a good opportunity and a time to allow people to invest directly into the club. And that's something which we're able to do. The company was actually founded by a former footballer, Gianluca Vialli, who played at Chelsea and before that played at Juventus and Sampdoria. Now works with the Italian national team, and he actually co-founded the company along with our CEO, who is of an investment banking background, so has a lot of understanding of investment products. And it was the bringing together of those two visions of, how can we support clubs to raise capital, but then how can we also enable supporters to become involved in their club's development through investment, that the idea of Tifosi was born. And since then, we've also added other products to our offering, if you like. So we also arrange larger investments with institutions and everything, but still at the center of our proposition is this investment platform where we can connect supporters and other investors with clubs looking to raise capital.
And that's and it's very unique when you consider that, because when you talk about shareholding, as you talk about debt, equity, etc., there's very much that main structure around business and corporate understanding, etc. Sport's very different to that, and I think that's interesting because what you probably see, and certainly what I think we will see from the uptake that we'll see from the supporters, is you start to do it out of love rather than a kind of a business sense, if that makes sense. You do it because of your emotional connection with the club that is so dear to you. Interesting to see that a company such as Tifosi doing that within a very much, not exclusive to, but very much a sports-based background and stuff as well.
It is exclusive, Cammy. We only work with professional sports clubs and investors into professional sports clubs, both at the sophisticated end of the spectrum and what are called retail investors, which is ordinary people looking to make an investment as they would through any kind of platform, whether that be in shares or in some form of savings or bonds or whatever else. So, we are exclusively focused on sport. Tifosi actually means fans. Since we have an Italian sort of heritage in our background, Tifosi is the Italian word for fans. So that's where it comes from. It's spelled differently to how the Italians spell it. But that's a nod to Fausto and Gianluca, who founded the company. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think people invest for a variety of reasons. Obviously, some people invest purely for a return. And then there are others who invest more because of the emotional connection that they might have with a company or particularly with a sports club. I think what's probably worth just mentioning is obviously these are real shares. This is a real investment, and people obviously will be attracted by the emotional connection that they have with the club, but they should take the time to read the offering document, make sure they've understood the investment that they're making and the risks that are associated with that, because no investment is risk-free. So that's only one thing I would stress. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, when you're dealing with sports clubs, there's always going to be an emotional side, people who feel a connection and that they want to keep that connection going, particularly, even through the family. And John Bennett in the investment videos, there'll be another video coming out soon in which he talks about being able to pass on his shares to his loved ones. And I think that matters to a lot of people. And that's one of the main motivators to have ownership in a sports club, and particularly, I think, in a football club.
Yeah, and I think, Rangers have said that there has been a desire for this to happen within a particular vehicle for fans to be able to try and invest. And I think, if you look at the offering as such at the moment just now, that anyone can look of a value between £500 to £100,000, you're going to come across a different, level of fan who can put in that amount in terms of what they can do personally. What's really interesting, I think, is being able to try and do it at this particular period in the club's history, because we are very much focused on the 150 years. The chairman and John as well has also said the next steps now are how we build on that platform for the next 150 years and be able to try and take that forward. And there definitely has been an appetite from fans to not only get us out of a fairly dark period in our history in the last 10 years, but then to move that on to the next platform. And fundamentally, that is built on the success of winning the league. So I think that there's a phrase that always sticks with me, which I'm sure it was John had coined before, which is, we'll always look to be able to fix our roof when the sun is shining. And this is a great opportunity for us to be able to put that into the club now. Again, as you say, if fans are looking to be able to invest anything between £500 to £100,000.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, look, John and the other members of the board spoke to us about that at length. And again, in the video, I think, John talks about, there's a new video which will come out later in the week and explain a little bit further about why this type of offering and why particularly this moment in time. And John does talk about the fact that when he and some of the other larger investors came into the club, there was already at that point a demand from supporters to invest, but they felt that the risk level of investing at that point in time, when the club was very much in the midst of its recovery period, that didn't feel like the right time to them to open a share offering to the wider investor base. Of course, it's not that this is risk-free now, but I think what they talk about is having de-risked the investment somewhat since they came into the club in 2015. And I think you can look at the accounts when the investment period actually opens. People will be able to download a copy of the investment document, the offer document, and you'll be able to look at the accounts and how those have progressed over the last few years. And you can see that the revenues have obviously increased, commercial revenues in particular. Obviously, being in Europe, the club has been able to secure additional revenue from prize money, and obviously prior to COVID, the additional European fixtures that they've been able to host at Ibrox. So, the club has certainly improved its numbers over the last few years, and I think it's in that context, as you said, the 150 years, that the board have felt now is a time that makes sense to take the offering out and to a wider group and to allow more people to invest at this stage.
Fantastic. So we've put in some questions that we've had from some of our Patreon subscribers, and also I think part of a kind of general Q&A that I felt it might be good for us to be able to try and cover again. There are some FAQs on the site, which, as I say, anyone can jump on to be able to try and have a look at. But I thought it'd be good just to maybe provide a little bit of kind of clarity, just in case anyone's looking for any further context, or just to understand what it all means, and anyone who's looking to be able to try and put in an investment. So I'm correct in saying that you will receive a share certificate based on obviously what you're looking to be able to try and put in.
Yeah, before I get on to that question, I just want to stress a couple of points. One is obviously, just for absolute clarity, we're at the pre-registration period now. So we've had a couple of people who've maybe been slightly confused, who think that they're making an application for shares, and that's not the case. When you pre-register, there is a question in there that asks you how much you think you might want to invest, but that's just to gauge, the appetite of investors at this stage, and to tell the club board, what they should expect, and then ultimately, are we expecting to fill the offering or not, etc. And the other thing I just want to stress is that it doesn't make any difference when you pre-register, as long as you pre-register before the deadline on Friday the 11th at 5:59 p.m. You will be treated exactly the same as everybody else. There will then be an email sent out a little bit later than that, which will be sent out to all people who pre-register at the same time. So it doesn't matter whether you pre-register yesterday or you pre-register on Friday the 11th at 5:58 p.m. You will be getting exactly the same treatment when it comes to access to the priority investment period. So coming back to share certificate, so basically what everybody will have who has a successful application, obviously when you're applying, you are making an application for shares, and the board then grants those shares as the next step, and then you are then a shareholder. You'll be able to access then your Tifosi profile on the website. You can see your portfolio, which might only include shares of Rangers, but could also include other investments that you might make through Tifosi at some point. And there you'll be able to access all the documents related to your investments, including your certificate of share ownership. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's just, because there's a couple of questions which I think will be based around operating on the Tifosi platform, because obviously the link on the club site will take you onto the platform at the moment just now to do your pre-registration. One of the questions that we had asked was, if you already own shares, are these the same ones, and can they be put together in one place? And that's something that Tifosi can do.
That's right, yeah. So a number of people own shares that were issued at various times in the past, including the IPO that took place around 8-9 years ago. And yes, those shares can be transferred. First of all, they are the same shares. They are ordinary shares in the company. And those can be transferred onto the Tifosi platform. So if anybody were to buy new shares now, they can also transfer their old ones. It will be a process that takes place after the offering of these set of shares has been completed, but you'd then be able to move them across, and then you'd see them all in one portfolio and have that online investment access, so you can see everything in one place.
And in terms of the pre-registration and being able to try and take out shares in my name, I'm unable to do that if I was looking to take it out in someone else's name. So, for example, if I wanted to buy it for, my kids, for example.
Yeah, I mean, when you make an application, it is important, you are applying in your name and answering questions about yourself, and you will be verified as that investor Once shares are then issued, you do have the option to transfer them. That's not going to be a problem, as long as the person you're transferring them to is over the age of 18, because that's important that they are, as a registered shareholder, they have to be over the age of 18. And they will need to create a Tifosi profile, so you can move them across into the other person's Tifosi profile, and then they've got them online. But yes, it's absolutely possible once the shares have been issued. And we have been asked by a couple of people, they wanted to buy them for a child, for a son, or possibly a nephew, actually, or a daughter. And that's all fine, but obviously if that person is not yet 18 years of age, you will need to wait until they're 18 before that transfer can be made. But once they are there, yes, that transfer can happen.
And would you be able to do that? So if, for example, if I wanted to put an investment in of £1,000, could I divide that, or would it just be the £1,000 block that I would have within my name, rather than just, as I say, split it between myself and, my son, if I wanted to get it for his 18th birthday?
Yes, you would be able to split it up, yes. I think this is something that we'll need to make a final decision on with the club, but I would expect us to have round number units. So maybe it's, units of £100 worth of shares that we would move across. I don't think we would be looking to transfer individual shares. The last time that shares were sold was, in the pennies. So it wouldn't make sense to be transferring, very small numbers of shares out to people. So I think it would probably be in units of about £100, which is also going to be the amount that people will be able to invest through the platform in the first place. So £500 is the minimum, but after that, it will be in increments of £100. So you could apply for 600, 700, 800, etc. So I think that would probably make sense as the unit, which would be then transferable through the website to other people.
Okay, brilliant. You mentioned there the offering and pre-registration has now been open for just over 2 days. And can you tell me a little bit about how you felt the demand has kind of come in? Was that something that you were prepared for in terms of the amount of pre-registration that's happened?
Yeah, I think, we're aware of Rangers and its iconic status in both Scottish and British and even global football. This is not a small club. So, and we know also, I've obviously spent some months talking with the club, and we know a lot about, the nature of Rangers supporters and the passion that they have for the club. So we were certainly expecting and very well prepared for high demand. We had a very high level of traffic hitting the website shortly after the announcement on Tuesday morning. We've had a large number of pre-registrations. I can't actually tell you the specific number, but it is multiple thousands of people who have now pre-registered, which is very encouraging. We have still 10 days, maybe a bit more like 9 days to go of the pre-registration period. And, there's going to be more communication coming out through the club website and social media, etc. So we expect to encourage further people to pre-register. But yes, so far I would say that we are positively encouraged by the reaction from the supporter base.
Fantastic. And I take it from that perspective, the hope is that if we get to the pre-registration, we're hoping to fill the offering in its entirety as well. Now, flip side of that scenario is that if we don't fill it, we will still be able to keep it open for people to register interest even past the 11th of June.
Yeah, so the way it works is, up to the 11th of June, you're just registering an interest to invest. Then what will happen is that shortly after that, those people who've pre-registered, however many that ends up being, will receive an email and they will be granted exclusive access. This is why it's worth pre-registering. And that priority access, so your specific email that you pre-registered with will be effectively whitelisted for the investment page. So you will be able to log in and see the page, but others who haven't pre-registered won't be able to. And then that priority period is scheduled to last for 1 week. So you have 1 week then to apply for your shares. Now, this is a first come, first served situation. So obviously, once that link arrives in your inbox, you might want to action it reasonably quickly to give yourself a high chance of getting the shares that you want. But then after that priority period is then over, if there's still some space in the allocation of 6.75 million or thereabouts, then it would then be opened, the page would then be open to the full public at that stage, and anybody would be able to see the investment page. So the privileged access through the priority period would no longer apply, and anybody who hadn't pre-registered would then be able to go in and apply for shares. But I think the general feeling of both ourselves and the club is that the demand, is high, and so there is a possibility that all the allocation could be taken up within the priority period. And we can't predict that at this stage. We have an idea of how many people are pre-registering, but we cannot say definitively who will actually buy shares. Some people might be pre-registering so they can have a look and then decide not to buy shares. But then on the other hand, 100% of people pre-registering could go and try and apply for shares. So, it's difficult to be absolutely sure. Every group of fans is different. Every group of potential investors is different. But that's the way it will work. So pre-registration, which then gives access to 1 week of priority. And then after that 1 week, if shares are still available, then full public investment is open.
And I think this was a question which I think had come into this from a couple of different people, just purely to understand the mechanics of it. But if the full allocation isn't taken, there isn't a necessity to underwrite it.
No, the club or the company actually is not specifically the club. It's Rangers International Football Club, which is PLC, the parent company of the actual football club company. They're the issuers of the shares. And yeah, they have no restriction on the low side, so they can issue as many shares come in. If it's, if only 1 million was applied for, then they can issue that. Obviously, they are capped at the high end for boring reasons, which I can go into if you'd like to know. But there is a restriction on the amount that they are allowed to offer. It's actually 8 million euros, which is why when you convert that to sterling, it's a bit under £7 million. So we're offering 6,750, and then the final exchange rate will determine the exact amount that gets sold, provided the applications are all in there. But no, the offering is not underwritten. I think that the club are excited to see how many people will apply for shares. There is, as I've said, an expected high demand. But no, if they're not offered or if they're not taken up by people through this offering, then they won't be issued.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of just, as I say, some of the regulations and kind of following stuff as well, you mentioned earlier on, we are a global brand. We are a global base as well. We are open to non-UK residents. Is that right?
Yes. So, anyone from the EU is free to invest. That still applies. We may be post-Brexit now, but anyone in the EU can invest without any concerns. Any investor from other jurisdictions around the world should check the rules of their own country. So each country will have its own regulatory restrictions or regulatory rules, and it is up to the investor to inform themselves on those regulatory regime sort of rules and regulations before making an investment. Okay.
Because obviously we do have huge fan bases across in Australia, across in the Far East, America as well. And I know that they'll obviously look to be able to try and see if they can do that as well. So they have to go to their own particular locality to be able to make sure that they are in a position where they can invest in it.
Yes, that's right. So, there are certain restrictions on making investments of this type in certain jurisdictions around the world. And without going into all of the different countries and their specific regulatory requirements, it's best if the investor just checks. It's relatively easy, I would imagine, in most places to find out whether you can or you can't make an investment into a UK company of this type of investment.
In terms of another thing to do probably more with a wider kind of fan base, some of the questions that we get asked were around whether or not a supporters club, for example, rather than doing an individual investment per person, if they would look to be able to try and collate funds to be able to put into, and we do have a mechanism that we can do that as well.
Yes, so the platform will accept an investment or application for an investment from an individual or from a company. So you can select to invest as a company. Now, a supporters club could be a legal entity, which is a company, like a limited company. I know that there are one or two Rangers supporter groups out there which are limited companies. So they would be able to make an investment directly through the platform. And obviously somebody within the company would have to do that and be the administrator of that investment. If the supporters club is not a legal entity, it doesn't have a company registration, then it would have to be an individual from within that supporter group. And then, of course, it's then up to the individuals within the supporters group what kind of documentation or agreements they want to put in place that then specifies who owns what of that allocation. So if people are collecting funds together and putting in £100 or £200, then it's really up to the individual groups how they want to document that ownership within a larger investment. So if a supporter group put in £5,000, but that was split down between 50 people, then it would be up to them to keep a record of that and to administer that, so that then if shares wanted to be sold in the future, they would be able to make sure that the investors who made the original investment would get the money back from their shares.
Yeah, I can already hear supporter club treasurers and bus conveners quaking in their boots about getting their door chapped as to whether or not their members would like to invest some money into it as well. So, yeah, it was a very interesting question. Certainly one that we're getting in heart and hand is that we've got some subscribers who would like us to be able to try and see if we can do that. And I think that would be really interesting for people to be able to come into it. Because again, even £500 is a lot of money, to be able to try and put up, especially at the same kind of time as we are investing within season tickets and My Jers, obviously New Edison House, etc. as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the funds themselves, do we have any ideas to regards what the club will use the funds for, in terms of the general fundraising purposes, how that will be determined?
Yes, so this will all be detailed in the offer document, which will be available once the investment period opens. The priority investment period opens. You will need to go onto the platform, complete some regulatory steps to clear yourself as an investor, and then you'll be able to access and download the offer document. And the use of proceeds is listed in there. It includes various projects which, as you would expect, would be designed to further the development of Rangers both on and off the pitch. So there's the Edmiston House development that is obviously ongoing. There are various projects being planned at Ibrox and the Academy. So various projects which are designed to continue to build the progress, the development of the club, and ideally enhance its future value, are those which are going to be earmarked for the funds. But the full details of that and what the club can and can't do with the funds is going to be available on a page in the offer document that will be available once the investment page is open.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really exciting for fans as well, because we obviously have had a large amount of focus on Edmiston House. It's a big project which we are undertaking, but we still have, as you say, the Academy. We still have the stadium itself. The focus which has been put on, especially given COVID and the dependency that we've had to have on the website and our digital journey, in terms of obviously what's happened, because we're now at a stage, and it hasn't always been the case, James, believe it or not, as well, where we're obviously back in being able to buy strips and all of that kind of thing as well. So we know that there's been a really heavy demand on certainly the club site, the Rangers TV site, etc. as well. And I know that there's obviously an aim to be able to try and put some of these funds towards that too, which I think would be really, really interesting to see as to how not only do we do that virtually, but also how do we do it in bricks and mortar, and how we're looking to be able to try and develop Ibrox as a stadium in the local area, as it were, in terms of the amount of change that will happen. It won't look the same in 10 years as it does now,
That's right. And obviously we've spent time with the board, and they've told us about the journey that they see the club on at the moment. And obviously, a lot of progress has been made on that journey over the last few years. But they don't think that the journey is complete. And John talks a lot about, recovery phase and growth phase, and how he feels that the club is sort of on the cusp of those two phases now. But, by no means, is it over in his words. So, the club continues to have investment priorities that it wants to invest in, to continue to develop, on the footballing side, to continue to develop on the commercial side, on fan engagement, etc. So I think that's the way that they've described it to us, and I think it makes a lot of sense. This is an opportunity to come in at this stage while the club continues to develop, and hopefully will develop further into the future.
Yeah, and I think again, like you say, coming into some of the specifics around the actual shareholding and the current status of the board, etc. One of the questions we're asked is, how can the shares be traded in future if we're not listed? Can you tell me a little bit around that?
Yeah, so that's right. So the shares are not being listed on a premium exchange such as the London Stock Exchange. This isn't an IPO in that sense. But essentially, because we're handling this offering, we have something called the Tifosi Exchange, which is a secondary market where Tifosi members can trade their securities that they've purchased on Tifosi from one person to another. So it kind of operates like a notice board, and it allows members to express an interest to sell or express an interest to buy. And through that notice board, effectively, those people are matched up, and it allows them to transfer shares from one person to another. And the transaction on the Tifosi Exchange is a direct sale between the buyer and seller. So we don't intervene. We're not there to say what is the correct or the incorrect price. It's fully digitized, and it's completed entirely through the platform.
And just so I can understand as well, because again, a question which I think is conscious of the journey and everything else that's going to happen at this point as well. Are the shares different to the ones that were initially offered as part of the original IPO back in December 2012? And where they sit at in terms of what the directors have bought in as well?
Well, no, they're exactly the same class of shares. So, John, I think in the video that's already come out, he says, what's important to understand is these are ordinary shares. And I think in the next video, I think again, it will be made clear again that, these are the same class of shares, the same rank as those owned by those who invested in the IPO, but also those who have come into the club and invested at larger amounts over the past 5 or 6 years. So that the legal term is pari passu, having the same ranking as those shares. So yeah, they all come with one vote. So one share, one vote. The right to attend the AGM. So there's no difference basically between these different classes or these different offerings of shares that have been made over the last few issuances that people might have seen on Companies House. They're all the same type of shares.
You mentioned this earlier. I just want to also just kind of touch on it briefly just to clarify as well. The shares aren't valued daily. They're not listed on the London Stock Exchange. No,
that's right. So the offering that we're making now, that the club are making now, I should say, they set the share price. A few people have asked us what that share price is. I mean, it's being finalised, and it will be revealed or disclosed at the time that the investment page actually opens up. So the price for this offering is set by the board, and they're not listed on a stock market where the price would go up and down based on demand, for those shares. So no, there won't be any live price. There won't be any kind of moving stock ticker, so that people can see a difference in price. Should people decide to sell their shares, they will actually need to set a price at which they would like to sell those shares. And it then depends on whether they can find a buyer who's willing to buy them at that price. So it's very much more like a marketplace, but not a full market where, the huge numbers of shares are being traded every minute. And that helps to guide an ongoing price going up and down according to demand. So no, long answer to a short question. No, they won't be valued daily, and the price is set by the board for this offering.
And as I'm sure we probably will see this scenario, because I'm very confident in how successful the scheme will be. What's the next steps if there is an over allocation in terms of the amount of people looking to be able to register, and then we then come back to it? Because obviously you've mentioned the requisite action once people have their confirmation back after the pre-registration stage.
Yeah, so hopefully everybody's, who pre-registered have received a confirmation email to say that they have. We are aware of one or two people who have entered their email address incorrectly by accident, and that may mean that their email has gone astray. We will do our best to get in touch with those people, but if you think you might be one of those people, please do try to log back in and check that your email address is correct. You will obviously need your email address to log in. So if you can't log in, it may be because it's been made incorrectly. In which case, contact us through Rangers at Tifosi or rangers@tifosi.com or through the live chat on the webpage, and we'll see what we can do to help you. But once you're pre-registered, on the day of the investment page priority period being opened, you'll receive an email with a link that will allow you to go and then make your application for shares. Once the total amount of allocation is reached, assuming that it is, then the page will go into over allocation, right? So there will be a notice that, share applications can still be taken. It's a warning that, at that point in time, that there's a high likelihood that you would not get the shares that you've applied for because we're past the stage of the full allocation. So we have an overflow list of applications to make sure that then if anybody does drop out of the original list, we can then fill that gap with somebody from the overflow list. The application list is actually then sent to the board of the company, which is the PLC, for approval. They have the right to decline any application or to scale an application back. But we do expect, that allocation to be done on a first come, first served basis for fairness. It doesn't seem fair to pick and choose too much between people, so that's why it makes sense to act with some urgency when the investment page is open. And so, if anybody's application is dropped out, people can decide to drop their application, to withdraw their application. If they do so within a 14-day cooling off period, they can cancel their application. So that's why we have the overflow list. If we do go over the amount of 6.75 million, just to make sure that there's somebody there in case any application is cancelled or rejected for any reason. There are things like anti-money laundering checks built into our systems to make sure that the money we're accepting is not being laundered and, is coming from a known use of funds or source of funds. So there's all these sorts of things, and it's very rare, obviously, that an application is declined on those kinds of bases. But if for any reason applications are dropped, we would then fill those from the overflow list, and that's how that would then be completed. So we would hope to end up issuing the maximum amount of shares that we're able to under the cap that's imposed by the regulator.
Fantastic. So just to make that crystal for everyone, then we have got the pre-registration application deadline, which takes us up to Friday 11th of June, 5:59 p.m. And then, in the strongest possible terms, could you please make sure that you keep an eye on your email addresses, because as soon as you receive the email and the offering page is open, you then need to jump straight onto that to make sure that you then get the opportunity to do so. And that is first come, first served.
That's right. And we do intend, once we've gathered most of the pre-registrations, we do intend to inform those individuals once it's been decided when the actual investment page will open, so that people don't have to literally watch their email like a hawk. They'll be able to actually log in at the appropriate time and be in a position to invest.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, listen, James, firstly, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to me today, and I think answering some great questions that we had from our subscribers and being able to try and provide some more clarity with that. If it helps, I've understood it, which again, like I say, is probably the litmus test for most people. What I would love to be able to try and do, if we get any more inquiries, is to be able to try and get you back on even if it's just for a quick chat, and we can include it as part of our daily update on our Patreon site, if that would be okay.
More than happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you. James, listen, again, thank you so much for your time. I know that you'll be mega busy, but thank you for joining us this week in Heart and Hand. Really look forward to speaking to you again. Really can't wait to see how well the offering is going to do, and the resultant funds going into the club and making some fantastic improvement and development.
Absolutely. It's been great to be on. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Thank you now.